So, first of all, Stephanie, Your Honor, I have to say it is an honor to be talking to you. And congratulations on being appointed to the Alameda Superior Court. I guess the first thing I just wanted to ask you about is how did it feel to be, kind of this, in some ways, a pioneer, kind of breaking some barriers, and also being a Japanese American woman getting this really amazing position with the California courts.
Well, thank you so much. I think when I first got the call that I was going to be appointed, what they tell you was the governor in the state of California has decided we're going to appoint you to Alameda County. Please don't say anything for 48 hours until the press release comes out. And you never know if you're going to get a call in the first place, or when that might be. So it's kind of like a bolt of lightning out of nowhere where I could talk to my spouse about it, but I wasn't really permitted to tell anyone else. I'm just kind of in shock for a bit. I think that once things wore off and a few days went by and I had time to think about it a bit more, I just think that I feel like a lot of responsibility. Frankly, I feel some pressure. In Alameda County, it's my understanding that Asian Americans are, I think it's the highest percentage of, any ethnicities in the county. I think maybe more than Caucasians at this point. But the representation is not reflected on the bench. There are some Asian American men. I don't recall how many. There's 3 other Asian American women who are judges. So the representation is certainly not proportional to the population. And so I think I just feel a sense of responsibility, regardless of ethnicity, but also, more so you want to have people come into your courtroom, you want to see that diversity. You want to see different kinds of people on the bench, whether it's different cultures, different genders, ages, even just life experiences. You just want to see diversity on the bench so that the people who come before you, they're a little more comfortable when they see somebody who looks like them or who went through the same similar experiences they did growing up. And so that's why I think it's very important to have some diversity on the bench. And, I want even more so just to be able to do a really good job. Like I feel that responsibility to be able to represent the community well, and do a good job on the bench.
And I had heard that you were going to put a photo of your great-grandfather in your office. Is that so?
Yeah. So what happened was, one of the reasons that I even put my name in for consideration was, I understand the importance of the justice system. I understand the importance of, having a very fair judge who, treats everybody fairly, who treats everyone with respect, and one of the things I did last year, right around the time when I was applying for this job, was I took a genealogy course and researched my family history a bit. And, I had known, of course, that my various family members were, in the incarceration camps during World War II. But I didn't really know the full details of the story of my great-grandfather. His name's Taiji Furuya, and I got his A file. That's short for alien file. So if you were not born here, you're required to have an A file, register with the government, and they're going to find out some stuff about you. And I got a copy of that A file, and I saw, his warrant for his arrest. They showed up at his house in Vacaville and took him away, before they evacuated everyone else in the family to go to the camps. And they did that on the basis that simply, he had some leadership, in the community. And the warrant for arrest actually says, based on these activities that he participated in, we find that there's, good cause to take him away. They showed up at his house in Vacaville one morning. He was booked in Solano County Jail, shortly thereafter. And then he was put into a detention center in New Mexico, separated from the rest of his family, who was in Topaz and Gila River. And, it just struck me how he had no right to counsel. He didn't know what was going on, no right to trial. These are very basic fundamental rights that all of us have here. I remember reading the report, it had his, I saw his booking. So I saw his photo, his fingerprints. I saw how it talked about that he was nervous when he was being interviewed. I was thinking, of course he was nervous, right? He probably couldn't even barely speak English, and he's afraid, and they're coming up to take him away and he doesn't even know what's going on. So
what was his position at the time?
At the time, I don't even know if he was involved in something at that moment, but years previous, he had had different leadership positions in different organizations like Japanese clubs and fencing and things like that. So I guess they deemed that to be dangerous, So certain leaders who had those types of positions or who were in the church or whatnot, the government found them more dangerous than the average Japanese or Japanese American. So they took them away first, and it just kind of showed me how, laws could be very political. Things could happen that where you don't get all your rights exercised, and frankly, when I read the report, it made me cry thinking that that's what happened to him, my family member, and it happened to everybody else as well. So I have a picture that I got from my grandmother's house. She really loved her dad. Always called herself a daddy's girl, and I was very close to my grandma, but I hadn't met my great-grandfather before. And actually, I have the picture here. I just happened to have it because I was making a copy of it to bring to my chambers. So this is him. This is Taiji Furuya. This is my great-grandfather. So, I'm going to have his picture, in my chambers, which is basically the judge's office, just to remind me about, if people appear in front of me and English is not their first language, just because they look nervous doesn't equate to guilt. You need to make sure everyone feels comfortable. Like most people, they've never been to court before. They don't know what to expect. If they can't even communicate in English, there's an additional layer of anxiety. And I have to remember that, there's a lot of people who are going to appear before me who won't be able to speak English. And I got to think back about him and think about how these people must feel and make sure that, everyone's treated with respect. Everyone's treated fairly in my courtroom.
And what a tremendous legacy you're taking from your own family's history to incorporate into this new role that you're stepping into, which back in the time when Japanese Americans were incarcerated, it probably was just unthinkable that there would be somebody on the other side of the justice system who would be sensitive, understanding, and being able to relate to what is going on. Though there were some, as we eventually did see with the Supreme Court. You yourself, as a Japanese American, you were a 2002 Cherry Blossom Queen, graduate of UC Berkeley, grew up here in the Bay Area. And I'm wondering, as you're thinking, forward into sort of the generations of Japanese Americans after the incarceration and what it means to be Japanese American and being part of the community. What have been some of the key things that you have felt like you've incorporated into that sense of identity for yourself as a Japanese American looking forward and also trying to link to the past?
I think it's important to have, looking at the past, it's important to have that sense of history. It's important to not forget about things. It's important to, even going forward, I have a daughter. She's 6 years old, and we haven't had many extensive discussions about, what happened during the war. But, I'll start from ground zero with her, and talk about how it doesn't matter what people look like. I don't care what people's skin color is, what accent they may or may not have. You want to see if there's good people. You want to be nice to everybody, I say. So as she gets older, I intend to, have more specific conversations about these things to her so that she understands. I think that we can't stop having these conversations, especially if history, isn't always learned. I think it's something that we need to keep in mind. And I think connecting to the community, one way through Nichi Bei, of course, is one way to do that. Being involved in Japantown as well. My hope is that she'll find a community organization, that she also feels passionate about. and that she learns about the past through me and through the community, and that she's also able to teach generations to come about, her great-great-grandfather, and experiences that we've all shared.
You were a columnist for the Nichi Bei Times for a while, both when you were, I understand, in Japan and then also afterwards. And I'm wondering, what has the Nichi Bei Times, the Nichi Bei Weekly, the Nichi Bei Foundation, what has drawn you to it? What has been important for you, and why do you think it's important for it to continue and to be supported in the community?
Well, I first met Kenji, I think it was in the late 1990s, and this is when, my relationship with Nichi Bei started. I was at Berkeley and part of the Tomodachi Club at the time, and we put on an annual program. I think it was called Culture Night, and I think he came to cover the story, so we met, and I offered to write, an article about Culture Night, because, writing was always one of my interests. Like even high school and college, I'd write for the paper, I'd write for the yearbook. So I thought, okay, this is something that's in my wheelhouse that I find interesting, and maybe it's a way that I could, be involved and to help out. So that kind of sprouted, a good friendship between Kenji and I. A couple months later, I went to teach English in Japan. I had just graduated, and it was probably Kenji's idea, I would think, to have a column. We called it My Japan Journey, where he just thought it's very interesting for a Yonsei, but looking Japanese like everybody else, and how that experience is. So, I would email him the columns, and they go out in the paper, and it was just such a great experience. Like there'd be readers who'd be like writing about travel tips, or, so even though I was far away, in Tokyo, it kind of kept me connected to community, and it made me feel like, I was helping out even from afar. I really enjoyed it. When I came back, I continued to write, but probably more sporadically over the years, about things going on. And Nichi Bei just means a lot to me. It was a way to keep connected. I really believe in its vision. And I think my favorite issue is the Cherry Blossom Festival issue. I think they call it the Japanese Culture and Cherry Blossom Festival Guide. And I'll have that there out on the kitchen table that entire month or two, because you're looking at the sea, right? The different obons and bazaars they have all around the Bay Area, even nationwide he has it. And then I know, I'll talk to my husband and daughter, this is where we're going to go this weekend. We're going to go to the San Francisco one, or we're going to check out, someone in another city. So I love having it right there, and it's practical, and it kind of keeps us all connected together as a community. So I love it.
What just kind of looking ahead, are there certain things that you have hopes for in terms of Japanese American community moving forward? You mentioned your daughter, who would be now a gosei, kind of. I have a son who also is, kind of fifth generation, multiracial. What are the things that you have in terms of your hope or vision for Japanese American community moving forward?
I think my main hope is just that we stay connected. There's the Japanese American community is not necessarily the largest community around, and I think that through Nichi Bei Weekly and other activities, I need to have a way where everyone's still connected. I want my daughter to grow up, not just knowing the history, of course, and having respect for and knowledge about what everyone's gone through, but also to give back to the community. I think that's very important.
Well, I appreciate your taking some time for this, the Day of Giving, because I know the Nichi Bei Foundation is really hoping to feature so many different people who are in the community, who have been kind of come through and risen up. And as you rise, you lift others up. And it truly is an honor, Your Honor, Alameda County Superior Judge Stephanie Sato. Congratulations to you. And thanks so much for taking time to talk.
Thanks, Jen. I appreciate it.
Take care.